Let's start with the inventory aisle setup. This is found in Inventory Management, underneath Setup, Inventory Breakdown, and then Inventory Aisles. It's important to note that inventory aisles and locations are only required for items that have a storage dimension group with the location dimension activated. Here you can see all the different aisles that are set up for my various warehouses. You'll notice that there's an aisle number and a starting value. Here, there's a checkbox to indicate whether or not you want the aisle to be sorted descending. The number in the aisle number field is the sorting field that will be used when you're sorting the aisles. AX will sort these alphanumerically. You're not required to use numbers, however, it's typically recommended to use numbers for your aisle numbers. Next, let's take a look at the locations form. This is found in the Inventory Breakdown folder underneath Inventory Management and then Inventory Locations. Here you can see all of the inventory locations that are set up in your warehouse. When you select a particular location, I'll select a picking location as an example. You can go through the other tabs and update specific information. For example, which aisle, rack, shelf, and bin that particular location is at. You can also put in physical dimension information. And on the other tab, there's a checkbox where you can manually override the sort code. The default behavior is that AX will sort the locations alphanumerically. If you want the locations to be sorted differently, you'll mark the manual update checkbox and then type a number into the sort code field to indicate the sequence that the locations should be sorted. This is important so that when the picking lists are generated in the picking workbench batches, the picking lists will be sequenced so that the items that need to be picked first in the aisle are sorted on the top of the pile, and the items that need to be picked last are at the bottom of the pile. Next, let's take a look at the warehouses form. On each warehouse, which you can find in the warehouses form in the same Inventory Breakdown folder, there is a new Picking Workbench tab. So you can select the warehouse that you want to configure and click Picking Workbench. Here, there are several settings. The first setting controls the number of picking lists that will be included in each batch. For example, if you want the warehouse workers to pick sequences of 20 picking lists at a time, you could set this number to 20. If there were more than 20 orders to be picked, then AX will split those orders into multiple batches. You can also select the maximum lines per picking list. For example, if you want to make the picking workbench use only lines or sales orders that have a specified number, by leaving the number as 0, you're basically saying that the amount is unlimited. If you set this value to 1, for example, then you're specifying that there will only be one line per picking list. Next, there is a checkbox to say Split by Ship Alone. If this checkbox is selected, then AX will automatically create separate batches for items where the Ship Alone checkbox is selected and batches for the items where the checkbox is not selected on the item master. You can also select the Split by Delivery mode. This will create separate batches for each mode of delivery. For example, if you have some shipments to be shipped via ground and some shipments to be shipped via air, those would be split into 2 separate batches. Next, let's go to the product form and I'll show you how to configure the Ship Alone and various other settings on the item. This is found in Product Information Management and then Released Products in the Common area. We'll select an item and then click Edit in the Maintain group. Here on the Item Detail form, we can specify several things. Let's go to the Deliver tab. Here, you'll find the Ship Alone checkbox. If this checkbox is selected, then we indicate that this item must ship alone and have its own shipping label. Oftentimes, this is used for certain hazardous materials, or if the item is already pre-packaged in a box and does not need to be packed into another box. You'll notice on the right-hand side another checkbox called Apply Boxing Logic for Picking Workbench. When this checkbox is selected, the boxing logic will be enabled. We'll discuss this in a little bit more detail later on. You can also specify a ship start date. When you enter a date for an item in this field, sales orders can still be created. However, the picking workbench will not suggest to pick those items until that ship start date has been reached. Next, I'll show you how to create a workbench profile. This is done in Inventory Management. Then, underneath the Setup folder, we'll go down to the Picking Workbench folder and select the Workbench Profiles form. Here, you can make as many profiles as you want. For example, if I want the morning profile for a particular warehouse, I can create a new profile and give it a description. Then, on the General tab, I'll select all the options for my profile. So, the first thing I'll want to do is link this to a specific warehouse. For example, Warehouse 11 and Site 1. Additional options exist for other criteria. You can specify the maximum number of orders to be selected, or the maximum number of lines. When these fields are set to 0, it means that an unlimited amount of orders or lines can be selected. On the right-hand side, additional fields exist for filtering by customer groups. If you've segregated your customers into various groups, you could choose to run all picking lists for a certain type of customer first. For example, if you want to run all major customers and then run all internet orders, you could create 2 workbench profiles. If you schedule those in the batch processor, you can schedule the time for the major customers to run at, say, 8 a.m., and then the internet customers will run at 8:30. This would give priority to the major customers in the reservation logic. Another checkbox is available to indicate that only single-line orders should be picked. When this checkbox is selected, only sales orders that have one line will be picked. In addition, you can select a range of priorities. You can assign a priority to every sales order from 1 to 10. When you assign the priority and use this filter in here, you can specify how the reservation would work. So, for example, you would set up 10 workbench profiles and 10 picking batches, selecting that the high customers should be executed first so that they get first pick at the reservation and available inventory, and the low customers with the 10 value would be selected last. You can also filter by the payment method. When a specific method of payment is being used on the sales order, you can use that criteria to say, I only want to pick sales orders that are being paid by credit card, for example. You can also filter by mode of delivery. So if you wanted to pick all of the ground orders first and then pick all of the air orders, you could use this field to create 2 different workbench profiles that filter by the mode of delivery. The lead days allows you to specify a number of days before the order is scheduled to be shipped that the item can be picked. The expedite field allows you to specify whether or not you want to select expedited orders. You can also select specific picking areas in your warehouse or specific item IDs. This may be useful if you have a new item or a promotional item that needs to be shipped, or for example, if an item has been on back order for an amount of time, you could run a profile to select that item with all of the sales orders that are available for that particular item once it becomes available from your vendor. Now that we've completed the setup, let's talk a little bit more about how boxing logic works.